So this week you have seen war arise in the world. Russia, Ukraine is filling all of the headlines. So when we see this and hear this, suffering can arise. Many people in the spiritual community are likely to tell you that we must have chosen that on some level. Now, whether that is true or not, and I don't want to go into that here, but I prefer a different way of putting it. I say, accept this moment as if you have chosen it. I think that's a lot more acceptable for people to hear and understand it in that way. So for many people, this is a lot more acceptable, because if you tell them that you have chosen it, many people are going to disagree or unlike you for that. They might say, how dare you suggest that we chose this experience? Who would choose war? Why would we choose this? And this also extends to personal lives, people's personal lives. You cannot convince someone that they have chosen a bad experience in their life. But what you can tell them is that this is our experience in this moment. The way I like to operate in the world is that I choose to accept it first before I have any real chance of bringing change to the situation. I want you to think about this the next time that you are stressed. Anytime you are stressed because you want whatever is happening in the moment not to be happening in that moment. So whether it's that you're late for something, what's really going on is you want the moment to be different. So when you are stressed, you are mentally projecting yourself into some future moment that you believe will fulfill you or even free you in some way. So that's the stress that arises in the gap between what is and what your mind says it should be. I like to refer to this as the stress gap. So become friendly with the present moment, no matter what form it takes. And I take this as a direct quote from Eckhart Tolle, one of my favorite spiritual teachers. This means to accept whatever your experience is in this moment. Because if you begin to argue with the isness of life, which is always only now, that becomes a mental habit of arguing with what is. There are millions of people all over the planet who are trapped in this mental habit of compulsively, obsessively, and ultimately unconsciously arguing with the present, that they never really want to be where they are. They don't want to be who they are with. They'd rather be somewhere else. You may discover that you dislike whatever your circumstances are in the present moment in many, many cases, maybe in the majority of cases. So you may be disliking the present moment. And this is due to the narrative, the mental narrative that you impose on what's going on in the present moment. So when you get irritated about something, you get angry or upset, for example, like a time when you're waiting in a line for something, you're impatient, a little bit irritated. Why not experiment with this and say, how would I experience this moment differently if I did not add the narrative? What would that experience of waiting in a line be like without the story that you were telling yourself? That story that says this is awful. You could then let go of the story. And when you let go of the story, you experience seeing the present moment in its pure form, which in most cases is just neutral and not that bad at all. I want to talk about the ego for a moment. Now, different people have different ideas of what the ego is. The way I define the ego is form identity. There is the physical form of the body, of your body, which for many people is already an important part of their sense of self, their ego. And then you have the psychological form, the personality, with its conditions, which includes all the things from their past that they like to identify with. So you identify with many things, possessions. So what does it mean to identify? Identify means it gives you a sense of self. It contributes to your sense of self. So there are a range of things that people identify with: possessions, achievements, knowledge, physical abilities, physical appearance, all these things. Identifications that you derive your form of identity. Now, in itself, that is not a bad thing. It only becomes a problem if that is all you know of yourself or the form identity, which, for example, the opinions that you hold in your mind. The moment you identify with an opinion, anybody who questions that opinion or contradicts will become some kind of enemy. Why? Because you are unconsciously feeling attacked in your sense of identity, because you identified with a mental position. And this is so common. This is why we see wars arise. We're in a time now of seeing war in the world. Different positions, egoic mind structures, us versus them. So ego is always identifying with something. And it's quite natural, of course, for humans to be identifying with things. The form identity only becomes ego if you don't know yourself at a deeper level. If you don't know the essence of who you are. I like to refer to it as the essence identity. So let's look at these troubled times that we find ourselves in. Wars and pandemic, financial instability around the world, markets crashing, structures collapsing, uncertainty. Civilization has never moved in a straight line. And that for every powerful, strong, defining moment in our culture, there are always a couple of steps backwards. In order for us as humanity to evolve, evolution happens through obstacles. Nothing evolves through the status quo. Evolution of consciousness doesn't happen in comfort zones. We'd love if they did, but we've noticed even over the last 18 months through COVID and now war, it is through obstacles that we are evolving at this time. So for you, whenever an obstacle arises that seems to be a block in your way, that's blocking you from moving forward, it may be the path forward for you. In reality, the obstacles has an essential function that it forces us and forces humanity to generate more, either more strength, more energy, or consciousness. This even happens on a physical level. Think about if you want to make your body stronger. What do? Well, you say, I need to exercise. But what is exercise? Exercise is that path that you make life difficult for your body because you are demanding that your body has to lift something, some weight. And your body will be like, oh my God, I'm not in my comfort zone anymore. This is hard. This is requiring more of me. And likewise, when life becomes difficult for the human being, there also is a demand for more consciousness. You need to overcome these difficulties. The demand is there. And for the time we're living in now, there are lots of things that don't seem to be very pleasant. In politics and so on, there's lots of craziness, undoubtedly. The only thing that we have to be careful of is that we don't become part of the craziness. Can you watch it and see it for what it is and not become a part of it? I talked about the sacred neutral, not being driven into debate and identifying overly with one position or another. And I think in some ways humans seem to regress a little bit in the collective consciousness, particularly when they watch a lot of media and listen to the politicians. It's the same with social media. Social media amplifies human consciousness. They amplify the human ego. And you go on social media and the internet and you see enormous amounts of negativity, be on Instagram or Twitter or wherever you are online. There's really an amplification of the collective unconsciousness from the human mind. And we see that very clearly through social media. And so as we go through this period, I can't personally predict whether we'll have to regress further into more collective suffering or not. It's possible. But undoubtedly, I believe that we will come out of this time in human history more conscious than we have ever been before. So during these intense times, I want to remind you to stay as much as possible in the present moment. Keep your center, stay in peace. And navigating these intense times, it's so important that we cultivate a mindset of a meditative mind, having a practice of meditation. Please do one of my guided meditations to help you in your own practice. So keep your center. I'll see you all in next week's podcast. Namaste.